There are some homes where mornings do not begin with dreams. They begin with responsibilities. In a modest home in Amritsar, life had slowed down around medicines, doctor visits, and endless calculations. For years, illness had confined Sathu's father to his bed. But age and sickness had failed to take away one thing from him, his faith in his children. Far away in Satwinder Singh, lovingly called Sathu, had learnt to live among machines and maintenance schedules. The salary wasn't extraordinary. But every month, before thinking about himself, he thought about medicines, household expenses, and the father waiting for him back home. And then there was Baljit, young, bright, always smiling. Life had given her responsibilities much earlier than it had given her opportunities. College during the day, tuition classes in the evening, and household chores in between. Sometimes, after the children had gone home and the house had fallen silent, she would sit with her father and carefully calculate expenses. Inflation, medicines, electricity bills. And somehow make peace with numbers that never seemed enough. Yet, strangely, there was no bitterness in that home, because some families survive not because they have abundance, but because they have each other. Neither brother nor sister ever spoke of sacrifice. Perhaps because sacrifice, when done with love, no longer feels like sacrifice, and somewhere between hospital bills and ordinary meals. Life had quietly taught them something. In some homes, dreams learn to wait, so that relationships can survive. Baljit had always been a bright student. Teachers admired her. Relatives often spoke with pride. This girl will become a doctor one day. And for a long time, she believed it herself. The little room that now echoed with children's voices once held anatomy books, biology charts, and dreams wrapped in white coats and stethoscopes. But dreams have their own price, and poverty has a strange way of forcing people to negotiate with destiny. The family could barely support one dream, and without ever making an announcement. Baljit quietly withdrew her own. One day the medical books disappeared. Economics books took their place. Nobody asked her if she was disappointed, and she never volunteered the answer, because some wounds become easier to carry when no one talks about them. Whenever Sathu's letters arrived from Bhopal, she would read them again and again. Not because the words were extraordinary, but because between those lines she could hear his struggles, his loneliness, his hopes, and his unfinished dreams, slowly, without anybody noticing. His dreams became hers. She no longer dreamt of hospitals. She dreamt of seeing her brother succeed. Perhaps that is what sisters do. They quietly replace I with we. Every morning before leaving home, she would bow her head before Waheguru, not asking for wealth, not asking for happiness, just one prayer. Waheguru, if one dream has to come true in this family, let it be my brother's. Ever since childhood, Sathu had admired men in uniform. Whenever Republic Day parades appeared on television, he would stop whatever he was doing. There was something about the Indian Army that fascinated him. Perhaps it was the discipline, perhaps the honor, or perhaps the pride with which those officers carried themselves. But admiration and reality are often separated by circumstances. The family was struggling. Life itself seemed uncertain, and dreams of joining the army belonged to another world. Or so Sathu thought, but sisters often hear what brothers never say aloud, through his letters, through his conversations, through the silence between his words. Baljit had understood. The dream was still alive, hidden but alive. And one day, without informing anyone, she quietly completed his application form, collected documents, filled out details, stood in queues, and posted the envelope, not because she was certain, but because she believed, somewhere deep inside she knew, dreams deserve a chance and prayers deserve hope. Days passed, life continued, and then one ordinary morning, destiny arrived in the form of an ordinary postman. Nobody knew it yet, but that envelope carried much more than a selection letter. It carried hope, it carried dignity, and perhaps it carried the answer to all those silent prayers whispered by a young girl inside a gurudwara. Hope rarely announces its arrival. It comes quietly, sometimes folded inside an ordinary envelope carried by an ordinary postman. That afternoon, nobody in the house expected anything unusual. Life was following its familiar rhythm. Medicines, expenses, tuition classes, phone calls from Bhopal. And then destiny knocked. When Sathu returned home and opened the envelope, disbelief and joy stood side by side. Years of uncertainty. Months of preparation and countless silent prayers had finally found their answer. His father tried to hide his tears, but fathers often fail when happiness becomes too overwhelming. And amidst all the excitement, one smile stood apart, Baljit's, perhaps because she had witnessed this dream much before everyone else. Perhaps because somewhere in her heart, this victory had belonged to her long before it belonged to Sathu. That evening, nobody spoke about sacrifices. Nobody remembered hardships. For one brief moment, hope had entered the house, and the house itself seemed lighter. Training changed many things. The hesitant engineer from Bhopal slowly transformed into an army officer. The uniform gave him confidence. Discipline became a way of life, and for the first time, Sathu began to see himself differently. But life has strange ways of testing people. Along with honor came expectations. Formal dinners, ceremonial functions, dress codes, a world where dignity was measured not just by rank, but by appearance. And Sathu began to notice something. Many officers came from families far more comfortable than his. For them, formal suits and expensive clothes were ordinary. For him, they were luxuries. During parties and functions, he smiled, but deep inside, an old fear returned, not fear of hardship, not fear of work, but the fear that poverty might one day embarrass him. When he came home on leave, Baljit noticed something different. The laughter wasn't the same. The eyes carried a burden, and although he tried to hide it, silence has a language of its own, especially for sisters. Brothers often learn to hide their worries. Years teach them to smile through difficulties, to pretend, to carry burdens quietly. But sisters have an extraordinary gift. They hear what words never speak. Baljit noticed the silence, at the dinner table, between conversations, in his eyes, and in those moments when Sathu would simply stare into nothingness. One night, he finally spoke, not because he wanted sympathy, but because worries become lighter when shared with someone who understands. Army life demanded dignity, and dignity demanded expenses the family simply could not afford. He laughed while speaking, but the laughter carried helplessness. Baljit listened quietly. No advice, no promises, no drama, just silence. Later that night, when everyone slept, she sat alone under the dim lamp, thinking, not about the problem, but about the solution, because somewhere inside her, she had already made a decision. And from the next day, the evenings became longer, the tuition classes increased, and while nobody noticed, another chapter of silent sacrifice had quietly begun. Days became weeks, weeks became months. Life outside changed with seasons, but inside Baljit's world, nothing changed. Children came and went, lessons were taught, notebooks were corrected, and after everyone left, a few notes would quietly find their place inside an old steel box. Nobody knew, not her father, not Sathu, not even the neighbors who praised her simplicity. People often admire sacrifice after they discover it, but while it is happening, it usually goes unnoticed. She repaired old sandals instead of buying new ones, ignored small desires, postponed little pleasures, not because she enjoyed sacrifice, but because love has its own priorities. And every morning before beginning her day, she stood before Waheguru, not asking for success, not asking for comfort, only praying that her brother would never bow his head before anyone. Perhaps she didn't know when that money would be needed, but somewhere, a sister's heart had already sensed the day. Summer afternoons in Punjab have their own laziness. Lunch was over. The ceiling fan moved slowly, and Sathu was enjoying one of the rare luxuries life had given him, an afternoon nap. But Baljit had other plans. She insisted that he accompany her to the market. At first he refused, then he got irritated, and finally, frustration spoke louder than reason. He raised his voice. The accumulated helplessness of months found an easy target, Baljit, but strangely, she didn't react. No anger, no complaints, just a gentle smile, as though she understood that his anger wasn't directed at her. It was directed at circumstances. Love understands anger better than explanations, and after a while, without another word, both sat quietly inside a cycle rickshaw, one irritated, the other smiling, neither knowing that this ordinary afternoon would become a memory they would carry forever. The rickshaw stopped, and Sathu looked up in surprise. Raymond. For a moment he thought there had been some mistake, but Baljit simply smiled. Bhaiya. Choose the colors you like. He stared at her, confused, speechless. Perhaps she had imagined this moment many times while counting money late at night. Perhaps she had rehearsed it in her mind after every tuition class. But now, standing amidst expensive fabrics and bright lights, she behaved as though nothing extraordinary was happening. Months of forgotten desires crossed the counter disguised as 10,000 rupees, and before he could recover from the shock, she quietly slipped another 5,000 into his pocket. "Keep this for your expenses." The words were simple, but they shattered something inside him. Suddenly, the younger sister standing beside him no longer looked young. She looked like strength. She looked like protection. She looked like home. He wanted to protest. He wanted to ask where she got the money. But some questions become too small before love. His eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in his life, Satwinder Singh felt smaller than his younger sister's greatness. Later, the truth revealed itself. The steel box, old notebooks, tuition registers, carefully folded receipts. Every page spoke of forgotten wishes. Every rupee carried a story. And suddenly, childhood memories came rushing back. The fights, the teasing, the arguments, and the little girl who always forgave him before he apologized. As he sat alone that evening, holding those old notebooks, he realized something. He remembered every argument. But Baljit had remembered only love. Time moved on. Captain became major. Major became colonel. Medals decorated his uniform. Respect followed him. Success touched his life. Every Raksha Bandhan brought gifts. Silk saris, jewelry, expensive presents. But somewhere inside, one debt remained unpaid. Because no gift could equal 15,000 rupees, saved by a girl who herself had almost nothing. And every time he looked at that old Raymond suit, he remembered not the fabric, but the love stitched into it. Years passed, hair turned gray, children grew up, life slowed down, but Raksha Bandhan never changed. One evening, standing at the gate of their ancestral home, Sathu and Baljit quietly watched the neighborhood preparing for the festival. Children laughed, women prepared sweets, and amidst the bustle, their eyes rested upon a little Sikh girl, no older than 10. In one hand, she carefully balanced a small plastic bag containing rack and sweets. With the other, she lovingly held the hand of her little brother, protecting him, guiding him almost like a mother. The sight brought a smile to Baljit's face and silence to Sathu's eyes. Suddenly, decades disappeared. Once upon a time, they too had walked those same streets, hand in hand, carrying dreams much bigger than their means. The years had changed their faces, but not their memories, not their bond. People often say brothers protect sisters. Perhaps they are right, but sometimes God sends sisters into our lives to protect our dreams. That day inside the Raymond showroom, Baljit did not buy clothes. She protected her brother's dignity, and Satwinder Singh spent his entire life trying to repay a debt that love had already forgiven, because some debts are never repaid. They are carried with gratitude. For a lifetime,